Hello, everyone. My name is Rick Page. I'm Dean of the Larner College of Medicine, and I'm so pleased to welcome you to this next edition of Off the Charts. Today, I'm joined by Senior Associate Dean for Research at the Larner College of Medicine, Dr. Kate Tracy. I'll be telling you a bit more about her in a moment. We're so glad, Dr. Tracy, you could join us today.
It's great to be here.
For all of you watching today, as before, you will have a chance to be a part of the discussion today. You'll notice there's a little Q&A tool on the Zoom screen. Feel free to go ahead and post questions as they come to you. After I go through a bit of discussion with Dean Tracy, we'll have those questions read to me and Dean Tracy, and we'll get to answer as many as we can today. In addition to our Larner community, I know a number of alumni are joining us here and have joined every time we've done an Off the Chart session. Since I arrived going on 6 years ago, I've been tremendously impressed by the wonderful alumni community that we have here and the wonderful support that's provided and support that in terms of showing up to reunions and reaching out and watching Off the Charts, and of course, the support that you've provided in terms of contributions that allow us to fulfill our missions. Now, our guest for today's edition of Off the Charts is Dr. Kate Tracy, who has devoted her career to biomedical research and education. Since we recruited her in February of 2023, Dr. Tracy has served as Senior Associate Dean for Research at the Larner College of Medicine and Director of Research for the UVM Health Network. She's a graduate of the University of Kentucky and holds a doctorate in clinical and health psychology from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. She joined us from the University of Maryland School of Medicine, where she was Professor of Epidemiology and Public Health, Vice Chair for Research Services, Epidemiology and Public Health, and Head of the Division of Preventive Medicine. She was the Director of the University of Maryland School of Medicine Clinical and Translational Research Informatics Center, and from 2017 through 2020, she was the inaugural Director of the Richard and Jane Sherman Center for Healthcare Innovation, a University of Maryland center formed to foster cross-campus research and education collaborations related to healthcare innovations. And what a great background to bring here to the University of Vermont. In 2020, Dr. Tracy was appointed Special Advisor to the Senior Vice Chancellor for Academic and Student Affairs of the University of Maryland system. And in this position, she was responsible for providing broad oversight, expertise, and leadership to the University of Maryland, the University System of Maryland campuses and regional centers in their response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Dr. Tracy is a scientist with deep expertise in women's health, with a concentration on cervical cancer prevention in underserved populations and informatics methods to support multidisciplinary team science, and has published over 100 peer-reviewed articles in a variety of fields. She's engaged in numerous interdisciplinary collaborations and has been principal or co-investigator or sub-team lead on research studies totaling nearly $100 million in funding from organizations such as the NIH, U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Dean Tracy is a key member of our college leadership team, and her expertise in multidisciplinary science and leading teams is critical for the growth of our college's research impact. We especially look forward to the expansion of clinical investigation in the UVM Health Network in her role as Director of Research for the UVM Health Network. That's a mouthful. Dr. Tracy, Kate, you're a valued partner and member of our leadership group. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
So I have a number of questions that we've prepared, and I just described your impressive background. You've been an integral part of the research environment at the University of Maryland prior to joining us for 2 decades. How is it now looking back that we were successful in recruiting you here to Vermont?
Thanks for the great introduction, Rick, and for that great question. So you mentioned that in around 2020, as the pandemic was unfolding, I was given the opportunity to ascend up to the university system level and to work across a 12-campus system with our COVID response. And in doing that, what it did was it created an opportunity for me to appreciate that up to that point, I'd been leading in the research space only and feeling like I was having influence through the different projects that I was doing. And that was important to me, and that was valuable. And yes, I touched the lives of, thousands of people through the research that I was tied to. But operating at a university system level that has 12 campuses and tens of thousands of students, the ability to influence was, through leadership, really, was really brought onto my radar. And so as things settled back down, I thought, what's my next chapter? So I began to look, and I had some must-haves and hope-to-haves. Must-haves, I wanted a place where they were doing high-impact, innovative research. I also am a product of public education and believe in the land-grant mission, and I hoped to find an opportunity with a public organization so that I could continue to invest in that space. I also hoped to find an organization that had values that aligned with my own. And big fan of the Rolling Stones. I know you can't always get what you want, but I was delighted to find that at the Larner College of Medicine, I found everything that I was looking for in an opportunity and so much more.
Great.
So that's how you got me.
We're so glad that you're here. We've talked some, and I mentioned the leadership role you've played in research. Mm-hmm. Can you share with us your own personal research journey?
Sure. So you mentioned that I'm trained as a health psychologist, and so I'm very interested in the biomedical research space, the part that behavior plays. And early in my career, I started to get interested in cancer, and in particular in cervical cancer, because cervical cancer is, I think, the only cancer that we know the definitive cause of it. That's human papillomavirus infection that persists. And we have really great ways to prevent it, routine screening. When I started my career, we really only had routine screening as a way to prevent it. Early in my career, the HPV vaccine came along as well, so then we had another way to prevent it. And what I was most curious about is, if we have these great ways to prevent a cancer, why are there some women that are still getting it? Why are they not screening? Why are they not taking up the vaccine, and those sorts of things? And so that led me in the U.S. to focus on sexual minority women, which is a group of women that have disproportionate rates of cervical cancer because they don't screen at the same rates as other women. And in low and middle income countries, the issue is really that many of the countries can't afford to have organized screening programs like our own. And so, my own passion was cervical cancer prevention, and how do we get more women screened? How do we prevent an entirely preventable cancer? And what grew from there was an interest in women's health in general and team science, and it sort of just grew from there because I'm curious and like to try different things, and I enjoy collaboration.
And what's the answer? I mean, how do we get the word out and provide in underserved countries? I imagine that's how Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation got engaged.
That is part of their mission. Is not unique to cervical cancer or to HPV vaccine, but vaccine preventable diseases are a priority for the Gates Foundation, and so they have put their tremendous resources and philanthropy behind that. Closer to home, rural states. I grew up in rural Ohio, and rural states in particular have been slower to take up HPV vaccination, and for lots of complicated healthcare system reasons, don't always get the same uptake of screening because there are just more challenges with getting to where screening happens. And so part of it is messaging. How do we get messages out there through health network, through local press, through other types of communications? How do we go to places and make it easy for people to engage? Vermont in particular has a fairly sizable New American community. Many of those folks are coming from very challenged countries. They're having to learn new languages, new healthcare system, new economics, new education. They're probably coming from places that didn't have routine screening. So part of it is, how do we go to them? How do we create those? How do we create dialogue? And how do we do it in a way that makes people feel safe and want to engage? Cervical cancer is interesting. So I've been involved in lots of different cervical cancer projects through the years. Interestingly enough, you can actually teach women to self-sample. So how can we get folks to take up sampling on their own, sort of guided practice, and offer the opportunity to drop the sample off. Sample gets tested. So I've got a project right now in South America, in Peru, and women are coming in, they're getting tested for HPV. If they're positive, they're getting automatically treated for the infection right there to head off the need to come back for multiple visits for treatment. And I think, in rural places, in places with communities that have been hard to reach, we need to think creatively about, would the community be receptive to that, and how could that be helpful?
Wow. So after really that impressive and important individual research career, you moved on to leadership at Maryland before coming here, and now you're Senior Associate Dean for Research, and you saw the position description before you took the job, and
I did.
and you saw it's fairly broad. For those tuning in, why don't you share with us the portfolio that a Senior Associate Dean for Research at the Larner College of Medicine holds?
Yeah, it's great. I did read the position profile, to be fair, and it has so much more than I thought it would be. So it is stewarding and leading the strategy for the research enterprise of the Larner College of Medicine. Currently, that amounts to almost $100 million worth of research funding a year. We, on average, put in about 250 grant proposals per year, so I have a part to play in overseeing that process and signing off on that process. It's being one of your lead thought partners on how do we develop a strategy to continue to grow that research portfolio. I have a really good working relationship with the VP of Research here at UVM, and they would like to see us grow that portfolio substantially.
That's
Kirk Dombrowski. That's right.
Listening in.
So, we have aspirations of seeing our numbers climb to, maybe 150 million, maybe 175 million. So charting that strategy, how do we do it? How do we decide where we're going to make strategic investments? At public institutions, resources are never unlimited. And so how do we make strategic decisions about the college's goals for their research enterprise and how those align with the university's enterprise goals at the same time? One of the things I didn't fully appreciate was the responsibility of space stewardship. So for those of you who don't know, the Larner College of Medicine is 350,000 square feet of research-oriented space. And it is also filled with nearly $50 million worth of very specialized equipment. And people. And so part of my responsibility is to steward the good use of that. It is also championing our individual researchers, building the next generation, and let's not forget research compliance, doing everything at our level best with integrity and respect for the folks who participate in the research process.
And I don't think we mentioned it in the position description. When a pipe breaks and on a cold night in Vermont, who gets called?
Who are you going to call? No, sorry. I couldn't resist that. Yes, I get a flurry of texts. Yep. You get a flurry of texts. Yep. I have a great facilities team. Eric Gagnon and his team of facilities folks take very good care of us. They are on it. They put out texts right away so that we are informed, and they bring in everybody that needs to be brought in immediately to attend to the problem, so we don't lose time and so that we don't lose our valuable investment in the research that our scientists are doing. Downtime is not a good thing.
Yeah, yep. In addition to all your responsibilities within the college, or really as part now of your responsibilities within the college, prior to your arrival, we achieved something that was in the plans for a long time and had not been fully achieved, and that was for the Senior Associate Dean for Research, also for the college, to also be, by definition, Director of Research for the UVM Health Network.
Mm-hmm.
And likewise, Krista Zala, a former star of Off the Charts, by definition, a Senior Associate Dean for Medical Education is Director of Education for the Health Network. Tell us about your role as Director of Research for the Health Network.
So that it's a little bit different than the Senior Associate Dean role from the standpoint of it's a very large network, multiple hospitals, multiple care locations, a complex system. In my role, what I'm trying to do is to foster the research part of the mission with the network and the partnership between the network, the College of Medicine, and UVM. We all value research as part of our missions. And so in the first year, part of it is getting to know the landscape, getting to know some of the unique qualities of the health network. I came from a place that had a multi-hospital network, but it was also in an area that had 4 other hospital systems competing for patients and research resources and what have you. And so one of the really amazing things about Vermont is it's a single health network that covers the state. And so we can ask some really interesting research questions if we prioritize how to connect with our patients and pull them into the research mission. So one of the really exciting things in the first year, which I also didn't see in the profile, was the opportunity to pursue grant funding to advance that relationship. So we were successful in getting $1.6 million to build out in partnership with the network, with the university, with the College of Medicine, call it a virtual workshop space or a research enclave. It's a secure location where patient-level data from the electronic medical record can be housed, curated, and analyzed to ask population health-oriented questions that ideally then are used to inform practice. So, for example, we talked about cervical cancer as my particular area of expertise. We could mine the data that sits in the health networks electronic health record system, identify folks who are getting screened on schedule, those who are not getting screened, look for patterns that might explain why they are or aren't, and then potentially be able to change how we relate to them, or whether that's reminders, whether that's taking screening to them. And you're a cardiologist by training. I'm sure you could think of examples of if you had access to, say, for example, 10 years worth of cardiology patient data, what would be some of the trends that you would look for that you could, depending on the answer, then translate into how you do clinical care. So the whole idea is to strengthen that research relationship in support of clinical care. So it was really exciting in my first year to be part of helping to get a good grant to catalyze that relationship and move that initiative forward, because I understand that had also been a priority for quite some time. The other big priority, and again, as a cancer researcher, this is near and dear to my heart, you hired Dr. Holcomb 2-3 years ago to come in and lead the UVM Cancer Center and be part of helping us recapture our designation as an NCI Cancer Center. And it's thrilling to watch Randy do what he does and does well, and to see that we are right on track for being able to compete again for that designation in the fall of 2026. And so I am one of Randy's key research partners in trying to build the coalitions to make that succeed, and that's exciting.
Yeah, and Randy likewise is a former star of Off the Charts. So along that line, and it's really been fun and exciting to you and I meet with Dr. Holcomb monthly to kind of check off the progress that we're making toward NCI designation. And speaking of NCI designation, why don't you share with us your perspective on what that means?
What that means. So it's a specialized designation that is given to a limited number of cancer care centers in the country. Right now, only 72 NCI cancer centers have been designated. So it's a relatively small number. They're only in 36 states. So it will be a very prestigious thing for us to be part of that specialized ecosystem. For me, it means important things for two different constituencies. First and foremost, it means important things for patients, right? So this brings world-class care right to Vermont, right to our backyard here. And it will open up the space for patients to be able to participate in research projects, to inform cancer care, and to get the best quality of care possible. So first and foremost, it's great for patients and the access that they'll have to unique treatments that might not otherwise be accessible to them. Then there's the research community and the specialized resources that come with being an NCI designated cancer center. So there will be specialized funding that travels with that. It will make UVM Cancer Center, UVM and the health network an even more desirable place to work and to be a professional. So we believe that it will be a jewel, if you will, for recruiting and retaining people. And it will expand collaborative opportunities for everybody that is involved in cancer care and cancer research. So for me, it's all great things for the research community and for the patients. Yeah,
and the NCI designation, when I was first talking to Dr. Holcomb about his coming here, it's an acknowledgement of the excellence that we have. You don't get that without being excellent, but it adds the opportunity to further excellence. And
that's right.
And you and I weren't here when actually NCI designation of the UVM Cancer Center was lost in 2008. And that is something that you, I, Randy, and as well as even up to President Suresh Garamella are all committed to achieving. And Sonny Epen likewise has joined us since his arrival. Another past star of office. We're hitting all the stars today, and when that happens after our submission of the Cancer Center Support Grant in the fall of 2026 that we've been counting down to for 4 or 5 years, that will be important to, just as you say, the patients first, the research, and one other thing that I am emphasizing to the state, and that is when we have a cancer center here, that will improve the satisfaction of primary care physicians in every county of the state, because they will have access to a cancer center that's really designed around providing as much care as possible locally for patients in a rural environment, which, just to remind people, is about over 1 million patients between Vermont and the North Country of New York. So this population deserves it, and it's exciting to have you partner with me and Randy as we will achieve that in the coming years. In addition to cancer, what other areas of research might you highlight in our college?
Yeah, so one of the interesting things when I interviewed, because I was coached to do a lot of good backgrounding on the organization, and I was like, well, what are the research strengths of the Larner College of Medicine, and was sort of blown away by how many there are. So I'm going to zero in on just sort of some top 5. One is the Cancer Center. I think it's a jewel that we're reinvigorating and reimagining, and I am confident that the application will go in 2026 and it will be successful. We as a rural state are eligible for a special pot of funding from the National Institutes of Health to establish what are called Centers of Biomedical Research Excellence, COBRAs. And we are allowed, or institutions, not just us, are allowed to hold up to 4 COBRA grants at any one time. And UVM, and specifically in the College of Medicine, has held 4 COBRA grants for almost 2 decades and moved them through their phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 funding. And the purpose of those programs is to build specialized expertise in research excellence and to attract top talent and what have you. And we have done that in behavior and health, cardiovascular and brain health, translational infectious diseases, and in clinical and translational research. So to have 4 crown jewels like that attract top talent is a really amazing thing. So those are some of our premier programs, but we have incredible researchers across the board in lots of other areas as well.
Great, thank you. So as a medical school, and certainly as a dean for medical school, I'm committed to our students being able to pursue their passion. They may have one passion when they arrive, and they may change what they want to do once they get inspired by scientists or clinicians or whomever they might interact with. And part of the concept of having every opportunity, hopefully, for our students includes student research. Can you tell us about your perspective on student research activities here at the college?
Sure. So again, health behavior being a theme of mine, and behavior being what I think is critically important to the learning process. I know that in higher education, one of the most valuable and high impact practices is active learning, active engagement. So when our students come out and say, hey, I want to have the opportunity to do research with a faculty mentor and see what research is really like beyond reading academic papers and what have you, that makes my little heart sing. And every year, every summer, we have at least 50 students who engage in summer research projects. A clear majority of those go on to be presented at professional meetings and what have you. Some of them yield scientific publications. And I hear almost uniformly across the board that it's a positive experience for them. It's a positive learning experience. Now, most of them, I suspect, aren't going to go on to be, academic physicians with, big research portfolios, but some of them will. And I like to think that those early research experiences are what sort of pique the interest and push them over the edge. So I'm super excited at the many ways that the college is able to fund students having those experiences, those high impact experiences. And 50 is about, 40% of our total student body in any one class. And so that's a good number. I'm committed to continuing to grow it and never having a student come saying, I want to do research and not being able to meet that need.
And how about those who want to spend a little bit more time?
There's the Dean's, I'm going to get the name wrong, it's the Dean's Medical Research Fellowship, right? So each year you generously fund two students to step out.
We generously.
We generously, that's right. The collective we. We generously fund two students to have intensive research experiences for a full year. And it's really exciting when students want to go to that level of commitment for a year's time of their training and really go deeply into research and learn methods and management of project and research questions and analysis. And, I don't know this for sure. I haven't looked carefully at the data yet. I suspect folks that go that deep are probably the ones more likely to keep researching the thread as they move forward. But that's also really exciting. And Randy, one of your stars from off the charts, has also generously funded research fellowships. So again, I think the commitment to funding research and creating opportunities for our students is really unparalleled.
Yeah, and something exciting I'm not sure I've shared with you as yet, and just yesterday I had a conversation. We have an estate gift to create an endowment for the Student Research Fellowships, and I've had conversations literally yesterday about potentially moving that into a virtual endowment with ongoing donation to support our medical student research programs. And that's just kind of a great example of, yes, the dean's office put the money in to start this, and now a generous alumnus is seeing this as an opportunity to support and enhance that opportunity for students to have research. And just something I'll mention for those listening in, if there's an area of passion that you notice, there are opportunities to accelerate the direction in terms of areas that strike you as something that you would want to support and enhance at the Larner College of Medicine. So you've been at this research thing for more than a couple decades. Do you want to comment on how you might say research has changed over the years?
Sure. I'm going to speak from my historic knowledge, not just my own personal knowledge of how much has changed over my career. Interestingly, starting in the post-World War II period, which I wasn't alive yet for, there was a big push to invest in the research enterprise of the U.S., and a lot of funding was put into biomedical research and other types of research, and the model that emerged out of that was what I refer to as the unitary principal investigator. So you have one very strong, very successful researcher, and he or she builds up their program and their, collective group of students and staff and junior faculty that work under them, and then they try to model that for people under them moving into that unitary PI role. And that's a model, and it worked for a while. In the early 2000s, when Elias Zerhouni became the head of NIH, he really worked hard to foster a new frame, which is team science, that we can solve complex problems more effectively and faster if we use multiple disciplines and have more people sitting at the table. And so he also wanted to see more rapid translation of scientific discoveries into commercialized products and clinical care that benefited the public. And so that shift from one very successful person chasing the funding and building up a program over to let's look at these complex problems from multiple perspectives, let's build teams of scientists working together, was a real shift. And it shifted not just kind of the frame of how research gets done, it shifted the appointment, promotion, and tenure policies at a lot of places, because how do you evaluate success and meritorious academic behavior if it's a team? Who gets the credit? Because it used to be just the lead PI. And so that was a big change sort of in the conduct of how we go about it. I think scientifically there have been some seismic shifts related to the Human Genome Project, mapping the human genome, gene editing capabilities, the development of immune therapies which luckily enough, we actually have right here at the University of Vermont and the University of Vermont Cancer Center, one of the therapies we have, and I know you could probably talk more eloquently about this than I could, is a special immune therapy called CAR-T, which harnesses the individual's immune system to more effectively fight off cancer cells and treat cancers that were, I think, somewhat intractable to treatment before that came along. Really innovative things like that. Genomics in general and the sequencing of large sums of data and being able to use that information to match treatments and therapeutics to the personal genetic code of the individual. I mean, these are amazing innovations. And I think coming on sort of the heels of that is AI and big data. And if you're going to generate all of this massive amount of data about your basic biology and your genetic code, you've got to have a method for harnessing that. Yeah. And I think that's where big data and AI came in, because the human mind, how do you digest tens of millions of bits of data about an individual and make sense of it? You need supercomputing for that. So those are some of the big things that have happened in my academic lifetime.
Great, yeah, it's really been astounding. You mentioned cancer, for cardiac electrophysiology, my area, to the things of, to put in a dual chamber pacemaker pacing the atrium and the ventricle, that was almost unthinkable just before I started training. And within a decade or two, we were putting in implantable defibrillators, not much bigger than pacemakers, and we were opening chests to eliminate heart rhythms that now we put a catheter up and take care of. It's just been a phenomenal time, and I've been at it much longer than you, so I've seen back to World War II. World War I and beyond. So the challenges, we'll get to opportunities for a second, and opportunities are good, but what are the challenges locally and beyond in terms of doing research this day? And we won't get into what people are thinking about doing at the NIH right now. I can't even think about that. Yeah. But just overall challenges, other than I can't help myself, it's really important to support the NIH.
It is.
And the federal budget for the NIH should go up, not stay flat. But that's a word from your sponsor. Beyond that, what else would you say are challenges?
Well, I wouldn't say just beyond that, because I think the financing of the federal research enterprise is important, and it is the lifeblood, especially for public organizations. NIH funding is critical to what we do, especially in the College of Medicine. And so the fact that fundamentally for many, many years the NIH budget has been flat and hasn't kept pace with inflation, and that means it's awkward to make new investments that are going to drive big innovations forward. And that is a challenge everywhere. That is a unique challenge for a place like Larner and for UVM, because we're a small rural state. So we don't have the resources to compensate for contracture of the federal budget research enterprise. I think some of the other challenges are translation, what they call the translation gap. So we do lots of great science. We have lots of wonderful discoveries. Many of those findings and discoveries don't get turned into patient care, or don't get turned into a product or a drug, a device, a therapeutic. And so figuring out how we can foster more of that, because we want, because you do hear people connect this to the funding, right? So people want to, why are we putting our tax dollars into this, and how is it benefiting real life people in the community? And I think part of that is messaging. Right. It's on us to talk about the value of that.
And messaging beyond just a clinical trial to get something out there immediately. Sometimes you don't know where the fundamental science is going to take you.
That's
but
right.
You build on that.
That's right.
To come up with a therapy that you wouldn't have ever thought of. So we just need to better explain. And this is something that I think you do so well. It's not always in the skill set of a scientist who really wants to be in the lab to talk about their work and get out there and frankly brag. We need to teach scientists to brag and explain, and we need people like you and me to take that further and explain how this work is making a difference.
Yeah, that's right. And actually, I'd like to jump on that in another important way. One of the other things that I think is a challenge right now is public engagement and trust in the research enterprise. And I think we should be grabbing the opportunity to do some trust building with our communities. And it pains me as a human being, as a psychologist, and as a leader in higher education that higher education is not being held in high regard, that folks aren't trusting scientists the way they used to trust us. And I don't necessarily think that's our fault, but I think we're in the best position to speak to it and try to do something about it.
So we've addressed challenges. What are the opportunities you see locally or nationally or in general?
Yeah, locally, again, I wasn't kidding when I said that there's so much strength and talent here at the Larner College of Medicine and at UVM and in the health network, and figuring out how to message that more effectively. So one of the priorities for me is figuring out, we have a lot of great researchers that do important research that I would put under the banner of aging research. And for those of you who don't know, 1 in 3 Vermonters is over the age of 65. We are the per capita second oldest state in the country. So there's lots of good reasons that we should be really advancing aging research and coalescing our wonderful aging research into a coherent message and theme for the university. There's also a lot of money because the baby boom generation is aging. There's a lot of money at the NIH being channeled in the direction of aging. So there's some opportunities that are just about the funding, but it's good for Vermonters. Yeah. And in a rural state, I help 2 aging grandparents deal with complex medical issues. In a rural context, healthcare is tough in rural states for folks who are aging. And so it's complicated by, how many resources are there, how far is it to healthcare, how do you get to healthcare, because transportation systems are very different in those kinds of places. And so for me, the opportunity space is how do we emerge as the leaders in rural health and addressing, not just understanding it, describing it, the patterns and what have you, but how do we come up with the solutions that have real impact on it and improve the lives of rural folks?
Yeah, and there's a lot of attention to rurality on campus. Do you want to just comment briefly about opportunities to engage with other schools and colleges and university-wide directions in terms of research?
Sure. It's not specific and unique to rural, but one of the big campus initiatives that I'm excited about, and I think you share my excitement, is how are we going to shrink the translation gap by encouraging research entrepreneurism? So in relatively short order, the University of Vermont is going to be standing up a bioincubator. And the purpose of the bioincubator will be to create opportunities for our faculty to take scientific discoveries and turn them into marketable products, whether it's devices, drugs, therapeutics. Faculty members don't necessarily, especially scientists, don't necessarily become scientists because they also want to be business people. But we believe if we give them the tools and the support structures and create the ecosystem here to encourage research entrepreneurism, we can help more of our scientific discoveries move to the market, which is good for citizens in Vermont and beyond. That will also be something that will attract talent to us. So, Vermont's a really great place. How do we attract more talent here from a workforce development perspective at all levels? And how do we attract ongoing learners? So the bioincubator is, I think, going to be a very exciting, it'll include the entire campus. It's a strong collaboration between the college and the vice president for research. So another big initiative that we're moving forward that I think is a real opportunity space for the college.
Yeah, I think that's so exciting. And the Parallel, there's an organization you know well, but for the audience, Parallel is Hula, which is an entrepreneurship space on the shore of Lake Champlain. And it's just there. It's dry lab. There's no wet lab there. And it's oversubscribed. It's full. It's active. It's vibrant. It's bringing people in with new ideas. It's spinning off companies and supporting the economy. And that's the reason why I really am excited about the bioincubator project, because I think if we build it, they will come.
I believe that's absolutely true.
Before we take questions from the audience, I know the audience is excited to get their questions addressed. I have one last question for you,
Okay.
and we're all interested in what you find to do for fun and relaxation here in your new home of Burlington in Vermont.
So I like to be outside, especially when it's warm. I haven't really adapted to the be outside when it's cold part, but I'm getting there. And so last summer, I bought the most beautiful Vespa. And one of my favorite things to do on a nice sunny day is to get on the Vespa and just ride somewhere. And she's not your typical small Vespa. Like, she'll go 70 miles an hour. So I can cover a pretty good distance on her. And so I can get out and I can see quite a lot. And so, like, I love to get out on the Vespa. He's going to pretend he didn't hear me say that.
Well, I'm looking across at another motorcycle rider here who's one of our support people, and I do a face palm when I think of the brilliant people who ride really stupid machines.
Don't hold back. Tell me how you feel, Rick.
No, I think they're wonderful. Please be careful. But
I always wear a helmet.
But beyond dangerous activities, what else have you found for fun in town?
The other dangerous activity that I engage in is I dabble at glass blowing, and I'm in the process of getting my glass blowing furnace back up and running.
That's exciting.
And I cycle. Yes, I have the equipment to do it. Actually, I have a little outbuilding, and I have the equipment that I'll be able to do some small glass blowing at home. So.
Well, you've so clearly, just in a relatively short time, integrated yourself into the college, the university, and the community, and we're so glad you're here. Now, I referred to the scores of people here to support are putting together these events, and representing those people is Dan Suter, who is Associate Director of Alumni Relations, and Dan is going to handle any questions that have come in during the session. Dan?
Thank you so much, Dean Page, Dean Tracy. We have a few questions that have come in. The first is, what percentage of the medical staff of the College of Medicine are involved solely in research?
Fantastic question. The question was posed to staff. That's a little harder for me to answer, but I'll answer it from the faculty perspective. So we have a little over 900 full-time faculty in the College of Medicine, and about 20% of those are primarily engaged in research. Now, that's not to say of the other 80%, some of them aren't also in a smaller way involved in the research enterprise, but we have about 20% who are primarily devoted to focusing on research all day, every day, and scientific discovery. It's a great question.
And might I just add, I like to think everyone's involved in education as well. So
right.
I think the question probably was solely as opposed to being classroom teaching
right.
or clinical. But I don't know many scientists who aren't teaching.
That's correct.
One way or another.
That is correct.
Which is
either
nice.
Directly or mentoring students or having fellows, trainees of one sort or another. So yeah, that's absolutely true. That's a nice refinement.
Great.
Thank you so much. We hear a lot in the broader world today about how artificial intelligence, or AI, is going to change the world in fundamental ways over the next several years. How is AI impacting research at the College of Medicine, and what are your thoughts on how AI might alter the research landscape?
Also a really big and important question, and difficult to answer in a pithy way. So I think some of the ways it's already being implemented is we have researchers who are AI researchers and are using AI as a method for understanding highly diverse and highly complex data. I'm not a clinician by training. I know one of the opportunity areas is how is AI being used in clinical care. And Rick, I'm not sure if you could comment on, like, is there any kind of AI diagnoses, the little diagnosis friend, how they used to have that goofy little paper clip, which you might not go with, but, so some of what they see as coming on the horizon is the ability for machine learning and AI to be used to identify diagnostic indicators, perhaps before the human would be able to put the whole package together because of the diversity of data. I think it's being used in genome science and has been being used in a form in genome science data for quite some time now.
How about biologics? The idea that you can take the genetic code and figure out how that's going to be shaped. That's the best I can explain. I'm sure you understand it better than I.
Well, as a psychologist, I'm not sure, but fair point. I do think that is, gene editing and understanding the genetic code and how do we move in the direction of personalized medicine. I think AI will be an essential part of that because it's a lot of complex data to sort through and try to find the meaningful bits. And those things are happening now. I think one of the things we probably would do ourselves a favor to be cautious about is just because you have a tool that says it's AI doesn't mean it can yield pristine and meaningful information. It really depends on what is the underlying data it's operating on. So if you're talking about, for example, electronic health care record data, which is generated by clinicians like you, doing your clinical care process and then recording it into an electronic format, that's one thing, and that's a more what I would call robust and trusted source of data. When you operate AI on other data just out there in the world, we have to be really aware that there's a lot of misinformation out there. And AI doesn't know how, when it's sicked on a data set that's publicly in the public domain, it doesn't necessarily know how to sift out this good information, this is bad information. Yeah. So there's a lot of opportunity. I think the bioethics of using AI. I was at a meeting last week, interestingly, with some donors, and one of the folks in the mix said to me, "The Terminator is already here, and the machines have started to rise." And I was like, "That is kind of scary." However, I think it's rare for me to go through a day where something isn't automatically providing information to me based on something I'm doing, whether it's what I'm typing or what I'm looking up. So, I think we need to be good stewards of how we harness that method and technology.
And I've been a bit skeptical, and I'm coming around because I'm just seeing how AI is having an effect. But to the questioner's point, beyond research, one place that AI is looking like it's really going to make a difference is in the clinical arena. Now, with full protection and confidentiality maintained and HIPAA all maintained, our pilot group, and it's going to be extended to all primary care physicians eventually, can talk with a patient while their phone is on, and then turn it off after that chat and sit down to the computer that they've been ignoring while they're actually talking to the patient. And AI has generated a patient care note that breaks down, the patient relates back pain that has been present for 3 years, increases after this, and does a pretty good note. And we have shown actually statistically in the pilot group that physicians feel like they're more productive and feel more satisfaction at work, great. Which is just amazing. So I think it's going to, as people say, it's going to affect everything. Thank you for that question.
Yeah, great question.
Thank you. You mentioned space and equipment a little earlier. How has the opening of the Firestone Medical Research Building affected the research mission of the college?
Oh, it's fantastic. Have you been in the Firestone building? We have, 35,000 net square feet of beautiful, premier, team science-oriented space. And so, and again, I've been here just a little over a year and a half, but already I can see the collaborative seeding that is happening as a function of folks being co-located together and sharing labs together and having collision conversations about the research. So we see new and innovative research ideas bubbling up as a function of the physical plant of how that building was architected by design, which I think a lot of people, it's a building, you put stuff in it, blah, blah, blah. And I think people don't always appreciate how design concepts can really drive relationship and collaboration and networking and just the thoughts.
And possibly productivity.
And possibly
when
productivity.
That was designed, the thought was that we could have 25% more productive scientists housed in the same number of square feet because of the open design and the thought that went into putting that building together.
Yeah, I got to give a lot of credit to Dean Page on that one because he got that over the finish line at a time that I think it was really challenging. It's in the middle of the...
Or crazy.
That would be another way to...
But indeed...
Such an important investment.
We were lucky to have done that.
Yeah.
And something else that independent of the science specifically in there, I am confident that because he told me this, one of the reasons we were able to require Randy to recruit Randy Holcomb was seeing our commitment to the future, even during a pandemic, because he didn't even come and visit. We were in lockdown, and he took the job and bought a house in a couple weeks, all on Zoom. But the fact that we had broken ground on a building that was going to have a floor dedicated cancer research.
That's right.
And I would posit that as you were being recruited and you saw that we're one of the few places that was actually building in this difficult time that just passed, I think it helped us recruit you.
Absolutely. It's important to see research organizations continuing to invest and to see organizations keeping pace with how the paradigm is shifting. So I mentioned the unitary PI versus team science. The Firestone building is a big, bold, physical commitment to team science and the recognition that we can do much greater things as teams.
Yeah, great. Perfect. Dan?
Thank you so much. We have time for one final question. Should we develop a UVM-wide and Larner College of Medicine-led Center for Biomedical Informatics in collaboration with the UVM Health Network?
So the dean mentioned that I ran a clinical and translational research informatics group for many years at my previous employer. I think informatics and data science are being woven into the fabric of how we do science, and it is so important. And so one of the things that I've been slowly doing is co-locating our data science expertise and trying to get the lay of the land for what our capacities are and where our growth opportunity spaces are. Codifying things into formalized centers and what have you, I think we're a few steps back from that, but data science is absolutely critical in the space. The NIH, actually, this is another pivot that has happened, is NIH and the National Science Foundation have stopped referring to things as informatics, and now they're referring to things as data science as a sort of a broader umbrella. And so we're trying to get with the tide and harness data science and harness it in its broadest sense. You know, many years as I was leading that informatics center at my previous employer, people would call me a bioinformaticist. I was like, nope, that's actually not what I do. What I do is much more medical and clinical and public health informatics. Bioinformatics is really genomics related. So I think we have a lot of opportunity to look at our capacities and the potential. And the hockey's a thing here, right? So, you know, what we're trying to figure out is where's the puck going to be? Because you skate to where the puck's going to be, not where it's been. And so I think as it relates to informatics and data science, we're trying to put our heads together and figure out where the puck's going to be so that we can be there too. Great question.
So I can't believe how our time has flown by. I really want to thank you, Dr. Kate Tracy, for really an interesting glimpse into your own activities, your background, your wonderful Vespa, and your vision for the future that I know we share. I also want to thank everybody who's joined us today for this additional Off the Charts. And I want to thank the people in the room who are truly here in support of our activities and make this happen. I think we can all agree we've all learned, myself included, more about you and the activities at this wonderful college and university. In closing, I'd like to just emphasize that there will be access to this recording when we close. You'll see online an opportunity, and I hope going forward, those joining us will join us again for another edition of Off the Charts. I would also like to emphasize that there's so much exciting stuff going on, and you mentioned the financial constraints with the federal government. We are always looking for people who are excited by the work you're doing and others are doing, and opportunities to support this work with their time, their talent, and their treasure in terms of providing support, which really already has made a difference. Firestone building included, not only, I should say, Dr. Steve Firestone, class of '69, who gave the lead gift, but the many people who provided contributions that are going to make a difference now and in the future. So in closing, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Please stay well. Thank you again, Dean Tracy.
Thank you.
Have a great day.